is my style exaggerated because I am aware of my presence being online, and do I use that as a way to kind of leverage what it is that I'm trying to do? Yeah, okay. That's a good question. I think it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario because I genuinely like this stuff. You know, you could scroll through my Instagram feed and it's just a bunch of menswear dudes because I genuinely like figuring out how to make the jacket or the shoulder on a jacket fall better, or how to get the difference between a good Blake welt versus a Goodyear flex welt on a pair of shoes, or something to that effect. And so I genuinely do kind of geek out about this. But part of it too is that I absolutely understand that I'm representing a brand or representing masculine style when I'm doing things too. So much of this is even more so the case because I'm in Salt Lake City, which, like I said before, is not really known for its menswear. You know, I wear something like this here and I get attention for it. And I've learned that in most parts of the world, the way that I dress is something that draws attention, but that's even more so the case when I'm at home. And I have chosen to kind of embrace that pressure. I like it because it makes me understand that I'm always representing my three tribes. And so I like that it's a little bit more exaggerated because then I am always conscious about whether or not I'm representing those tribes well. So if you like the pressure of it, if you're fine having that kind of attention put on you, go for it. I would say even go a little more exaggerated than you would otherwise. Yeah.
Hey, good evening. You talk about three different styles and approaches to how we're supposed to dress. What are some items which would meld all three styles, which you would recommend to keep in a men's wardrobe?
That is another good question. And not to shill my stuff, because I do have this as a product. It's the 30 staples, and it's something that you can pick up on the site. But there are some things that, irrespective of your archetype, every man should have in his wardrobe, especially because they either kind of transcend those or because at some point in your life you're going to need them. And so for the most part, those are things like a simple navy or a gray suit, a good pair of dark jeans, a solid t-shirt, a good leather jacket, a good Oxford cloth button-down shirt, a good pair of work boots, and a few others that they all kind of fall within the three archetypes. And then they, irrespective of where you are, as long as you're in Western culture, they will always look good, and you'll always just look like you're dialed. Yeah.
So I want to address this from a cost aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Men's Warehouse one time, and I wound up paying about $1,000 for one outfit, and I feel like that was completely ridiculous. I think the general correlation is that dressing well costs money. Mm-hmm. Where is there a, what's a happy medium there? Does it, I guess what I'm asking is if you go to Bell's or, an easy store like that, can you still make yourself
look good?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. The big thing that it comes down to is the value in it. And I'll tell you that guys who are in a developing stage in your style, shop at H&M, shop at Forever 21, shop at Target. Don't spend a lot of money because you're going to go through stuff quickly because you may not like it, and don't hesitate to try on things that make you a little bit uncomfortable. And don't worry about the cost because you can get stuff for pretty dang cheap. And so there are certainly ways to shop cheap. At the same time, once you know what your style is and you start to double down on it and you really start to get good at it, or when you're buying those staples, then it's worth the value to invest in quality things. And most men, I feel like, kind of reject that, where, I have guys who, they will spend 50 grand on a boat and 60 grand on a truck to tow it, and they will spend X dollars in insurance and everything else for wakeboard gear and all these other things, but they'll come into my shop and say, yeah, $1,000 for a suit, man, I just can't afford that. It's like, well, of course you can. You just don't understand the value in it. I'm not saying that you personally don't understand the value in it, but most men don't understand the value in our clothing, and that's because we're not good at it. If you're good at it, then it's not that big of a deal to wear a pair of shoes that cost $600 because I know that these will last me for 30 years. I'll give them to my son. I may have to resole the shoes versus buying a cheap pair from Aldo and having to replace them every 2 years, one, because they're crap, and two, because the style isn't going to be consistent and it's not going to last that long. So I would say take the cheap approach in your 20s, one, because of the financial situation that most of you guys are in, and two, because you're in that developing stage in your style, but don't stick there. See the value in your clothing and see the value that's communicated by investing in quality clothing once you understand what it is that you want to wear and you're doubling down on it. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool.
Hey, how you doing? I'm just curious, is there any way that you can possibly buy an amount, like for example, 5 pants, 5 shirts, 5 jackets, and carry on mixing them over and over so that you, how many times can you mix that outfit?
That is a great question.
Because I have a very, very, very limited cupboard space.
Uh-huh.
I live in a boat, so I've
Oh,
got that
yeah.
cupboard and that's it.
Yes. Okay.
And then I've got t-shirts, then I've got jeans, and then 3 pairs of shoes, and I'm done.
I love it. No, I love it. That's a fun challenge. And that's, I think for most men, we don't want a wardrobe that rivals our wives. We just have no interest in that, you know. I understand that I'm unique and that I like shoes, I like clothes, I like owning a lot, but most men don't. And I don't think that that's unique or an anomaly. The best thing to do is focus on simplicity and how that works with versatility. I can't wear a jacket like this more than once a month because then it becomes pretty obvious that I've got a limited wardrobe and I'm on repeat. If I have a blue suit or a gray suit, then I mean, think about like Don Draper in Mad Men. How many suits does he own? I don't know. He's always just wearing the same gray suit. You know it's not the same gray suit because the dude makes a ton of money, but you're not really focusing on that particular item. You're just focusing on the man who's wearing the clothing. And ultimately, unless you fall within the rake archetype, that's what you want. You don't want people to see your clothing. They don't want to think, wow, that's a great looking suit. You want them to think, wow, you look great in that suit, if that difference makes sense. And so by focusing on simplicity, by focusing on fit, by focusing on a color range that's usually between white, gray, and blue, and then by focusing on solids as opposed to patterns, then that's when you can maximize on all that versatility. You can start to mix and match different things, and so it looks like you're getting a whole bunch of different outfits out of limited pieces as opposed to everything being used as just a one-off. Yeah, so does that answer that? Yeah. Okay.
What's the best way to find out what style is right for you? Like, what factors should one look at himself and say, is it like music or?
It's a good question because it's not necessarily, I would have answered 10 years ago that it's music. And that is one of the questions that I ask my clients. I don't do a whole lot of coaching anymore, but when I do, I ask them things like, do you consider yourselves to be an introvert or an extrovert? What kind of music do you listen to? What's your ideal night out? What's your ideal career? What are your aspirations? What are your own personal limitations? I don't think there's one golden question, but it's being able to understand yourself well enough that you're willing to incorporate all of those aspects and then see your clothing as a way that can help you overcome the things that you don't like yourself and then get better at the things that you want to improve on. Because again, it's so important to understand that clothing is just a tool. It's just a means to an end. If you define yourself by your clothing, that's your job, is to define me by my clothing. That's not my job. It's my job to define myself first and then use my clothing as a way to communicate that to the rest of you. And so the better way to look at it is, how do I want to be as a man? What are all my aspirations? Who are other men that fit those aspirations? And that's, again, part of that tribe aspect. And then how do those guys dress? Do they all dress the same? Okay, that's easy. Then I'll dress like them. Do they all dress a little bit differently? Okay, well then how do I blend those different elements? And that's where you take that developing approach and experiment with different things. See what you like. See what other people respond positively to as opposed to negatively to. And then once you figure out what works, double down on it. Yeah. Make sense? Okay, cool.
Tanner, thanks for coming out first off from Salt Lake City. That's
Happy
pretty far
to.
away. So kind of from like a practical standpoint, I really enjoyed the part where you showed pictures of, 17th century men versus like George Washington. They're kind of wearing the same thing, but when they're from a clothing aspect, what specifically makes an outfit look clothing like powerful as compared to not? I think someone could wear the same thing you're wearing and not look powerful if they didn't put it together right. From a practical standpoint,
right? Could
you give like sort of like a few guidelines on that?
Absolutely. Let me go back to that slide because there are a few things at play here that make this work. Okay. So one is the power of contrast. Have you guys heard of the contrast principle? It's one of those things that influencers and marketers use a lot. If you're interested in understanding this, there's kind of a fun study that you can do by yourself. Fill up 3 buckets with water, one with lukewarm, kind of room temperature water, one with really hot, one with really cold. You put one hand in each of the more extremes, and then you put them both in the same bucket of water, and they're both going to feel very different even though they're both in the same environment. The one that was in the hot is going to feel cold, and then vice versa. It's the contrast principle. The same thing is at play with your style. Now, if you think about this, so much of Washington's aesthetic here is incredibly refined. It's very dandy. It's very dainty, right? He's got the powdered wig. He's got the lace up there. Same thing with down at his sleeves. It's a skinnier fit. But then we've got the things that we traditionally associate with the military. He's got the epaulets up here. He's got the taller collar, which visually puts all this weight up here at his shoulders, and so it gives him more of that masculine V shape that we're after. We understand the context of where he is, that it's a little bit more rugged of an environment. And then you also know, just based on your own historical context of the fact that he's a soldier in the field, that the texture of the clothing in this is going to be much rougher and much more durable than something like this. This is going to be silk, versus this may be something like a waxed cotton or a really heavy wool or something to that effect. And so even though the silhouette and the outline or some of the details are still very similar in the rugged environment versus the refined, you've got these more rugged elements along with him being injected in the rugged environment itself that provides that contrast principle. And that's what, to me, makes him look even more powerful than some of the guys who are completely dressed down. And I think that's one of the reasons why historically officers had that balance of being refined and being set apart, because they are in this environment, but they're not defined by it like the regular foot soldiers are. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so you use those social principles along with the natural principles as a way to create an aesthetic that communicates so much presence and so much power that in this kind of environment, it doesn't work. Right? Okay. Cool. Who's next?
Awesome stuff, guys. That's all the time we have.
Okay.
Good stuff for you.